Hi, I'm Margaret, and we are the creators of Pluto's Secret, an icy world's tale of discovery. My co-creators on this project were Dr. David, our senior curator of astronomy, and Diane, an early childhood educator at the museum. And really, this whole thing started when Dr. David came back from Prague with a great story.
Well, that was back in 2006. And in August of 2006, like once every 3 years, the International Astronomical Union has its world meeting. And I tend to go to those things. And I went to the one in Prague. And my main motive for going there was to prepare for what was called the International Year of Astronomy, which was the 400th anniversary of Galileo. But what I didn't realize, although I vaguely knew, that had been debates going on among the astronomers for Pluto. Is Pluto a planet? The problem was that there are so many planets being discovered, astronomers didn't feel like naming them all. And then they realized that they really don't have a set of rules to decide what's a planet and what's not a planet. So I got to Prague, and it's full of these beautiful clocks and beautiful, beautiful cobblestone streets and everything. It's very, very quaint, and I loved it walking around, and everybody was talking about Pluto. The first day of the meeting, there were people who were arguing for and against whether Pluto is a planet or not. The president of the International Astronomical Union, Catherine Cesarski, would stand up and plead for people to at least talk to each other and get some agreement. Because if we didn't do it, i.e. the astronomers, if we didn't decide what Pluto is, then the media will decide it for us. And what was a surprise was that the media had taken such an interest in this. The astronomers usually meet by themselves, but this time the media showed up because they had been clued in. Well, one of the chief people who raised this whole question was a Smithsonian astronomer named Brian Marsden. And Brian was very, very concerned about having to name all of these things as planets. And he was saying, we really have to decide what a planet is. And so the assembly spent quite a bit of time debating and voting. There were many, many votes, and they would hold up these yellow cards to decide, whether it's a planet or not. And the final plenary was, in fact, to demote Pluto to being a minor planet or a dwarf planet. The criteria were pretty simple among the astronomers. A planet has to, of course, go around a star like the sun. Yep, Pluto does that. A planet has to be big enough to clear out its way around a system. In other words, it has enough gravity to affect all of the debris and everything in space, so it really flies alone. Pluto is not big enough to do that. And Pluto and all planets have to be massive enough to be spherical, to be round. Well, Pluto does that too, but it doesn't satisfy all of the rules because Pluto is sitting in an area of space called the Kuiper Belt, where there's all these little pieces of rocks floating around. So they were arguing back and forth, and they finally decided, yes, they have to demote Pluto. And this went on for a good number of days, and it was clearly quite an emotional appeal that they were making for unanimity to appreciate what Pluto was. Anyway, so I left the meeting, and by the time I got home, walking to the castle one day, the castle is the main central building of the Smithsonian, I started noticing that on a little kiosk that was devoted to Pluto in front of the castle, there were a lot of get well cards and we'll miss you cards and all sorts of things. You see, what we have on the mall is a great big solar system. The sun is sitting around the Air and Space Museum, and Pluto is all the way over by the castle. And when I got to the Pluto kiosk, I saw all these cards, and definitely it was a very emotional thing. Anyway, I talked to people about it, and mainly I talked to Margaret and others telling the story. And it sort of caught on as to, well, how do we tell this story? And so from there, I will turn it over to Margaret.
Well, because I just thought this was really fascinating. My family had been following along with this, and I knew that you were at this meeting. And when you got back, then you were starting to write a paper about it, a big academic paper for other astronomers and other historians. And you were calling it Pluto, the Problem Planet.
Right.
And I thought, that sounds like the title of a great kids book. And I wonder if there's a way that we could tell this story so that families like mine, kids like mine, could understand what happened with Pluto. But in order to do that, we need someone who can really bring it to life. And that's where we discovered that Diane, one of our early childhood educators, is actually also an award-winning children's book illustrator, and came to her with the question, would you be willing to draw the pictures for a book about Pluto?
And I said, I would love to, of course.
So usually you don't get to meet the authors when you're writing a book.
No, actually, I don't. I usually get a manuscript from the editor or a publisher. And what was really so fascinating with Pluto's Secret is that both authors, you and David, were in the same building at the Air and Space Museum. And usually I would have to Google an image to kind of get like what the reference was. But the fact that both of you were in the same building right upstairs, it's like amazing. So this was actually a first for me.
Because we really did have a lot of feedback about what we wanted things to look like. I mean, I remember a time when you brought us an illustration of a kind of very wonderfully whimsical, crazy telescope hanging off the side of a planet.
Yes, I guess my inspiration is kind of like a Dr. Seuss illustration. I like, kind of very whimsical. But when I showed David, he was very specific about what an actual telescope looked like. And it's the same thing for equations. On one of the pages, which children will see, is actual Plutonian equations. But my daughter at the time was doing her algebra homework, and I figured, well, an equation is an equation is an equation. And then when I showed David, he just said, no, that is not the way that a Plutonian equation is supposed to be. Actually, he sent me what the actual equation looked like.
Some of the math would really look like.
Yeah, what it really looked like. I'm like, okay, I guess so this is different than her algebra homework. Okay.
So I thought that was really part of what was wonderful about getting to work with you on this, is being able to give you pictures of Clyde Tombaugh or Percival Lowell or Venetia Burney, and then have you think about what those would look like.
Yes, I think that, having, again, the references that I didn't have to search for, it's so monumental for any illustrator that's doing any kind of book. It's really important because we have our own idea, but because this book it's actual factual, I mean, having those images really made a difference. It was great.
And then we had the unusual circumstance that our main character was a planet, and one that we didn't have particularly good pictures of yet.
No, actually, I Googled an image of what the idea of the Pluto looked like. And I remember going to the gallery because I was also trying to figure out what's a good color because as a cartoonist or an illustrator, I'm more like whimsical in terms of like my depictions of characters. So I went to the gallery and I asked the kids, what do you think Pluto looks like? What color? And they gave me this idea of what they thought it would be like kind of like icy and maybe a little bit of brown in it. And I said, that's a really good idea. So that's what we did. So this is what the children and I kind of came up with the idea of what Pluto looked like.
And we had the extra challenge that there was still real science being done while we were writing and drawing. So when we started this project, Pluto only had 3 moons. And I remember about partway through, they found another moon because they were using the Hubble Space Telescope to look at Pluto to make sure that the New Horizons spacecraft that was on its way there wouldn't bump into anything. And then right as the book was already supposed to be in press, they found a 5th moon.
That's an interesting point because as an illustrator, you do get a chance to, especially when you submit your drawings to the art director, they may say, well, Add another one, take this one away, make this bigger, make this smaller. So for the fact that there are additional moons, no problem. I could put them in. That was great.
I thought it was fascinating the way you use tissue paper to put over your illustration. So if you wanted to add something or take something, you could just not change your main drawing, but just change the details that you wanted to change.
For all of you guys out there who are going to hopefully be artists and or illustrators, it's really important to have good tissue paper, because one of the wonderful things about tissue paper is that you never make a mistake. You can keep drawing over and over again on top of something, and then you can see the drawing underneath it, and then just keep drawing.
Well, I thought that was part of what was so much fun about this project, is how much I learned about Pluto and astronomy and how scientists think, and how much I learned about the way that you put the art together for a book. And it really was a collaboration. The project wouldn't be nearly as charming or successful without both of you. Well, David, Diane, thank you so much. It's always fun to reconnect on this wonderful project that we were able to do together. And I'm so delighted with what we produced with Pluto Secret. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. It was really a lot of fun.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.